President William Ruto of Kenya has responded to nationwide protests by eliminating the budget for the country's first and second ladies' offices. In a live broadcast, he outlined extensive austerity measures, including dissolving 47 state agencies and halting non-essential official travels. The president declared, in his words, the number of government advisors will be immediately reduced by 50% and confirmed the removal of operations from the First Lady and Second Lady and Prime Cabinet's wife's offices. Well, joining me on the program is Donald Deya, is the Chief Executive Officer, Pan-African Lawyers Union from Tanzania. Thank you for joining me, Donald. Now, let's get to it.
Thank you very much for having me again.
Yes. I mean, a lot is happening in Kenya, and I guess in less than a week, we've seen the president, well, I call it bow to pressure and reverse and review a lot of policies. I'd like to know your immediate reaction first. Is this democracy at play or a president who is just apprehensive and is doing everything to keep his job?
First, I would like you to review your English. The president did not declare any austerity measures. What he declared was not austerity. He reversed back on conspicuous consumption. He reversed back on rash expenditure, where they were ordering austerity on everybody else who were living lavishly. So what he did was the basic common sense thing that he should have done in the first place. And two, yes, in a sense, we're seeing democracy at play. We are seeing citizens, especially young citizens, rising up and saying no more, saying we're not going to accept this anymore. And the government is backpedaling, trying to find a face-saving way out of being completely booted out of the office by the street. So yes, as a Gen X, I'm really, really proud of what the Gen Zs in Kenya have done.
All right. Just to clear the air, what I actually said is that he outlined extensive austerity measures, meaning that basically it cut down on the cost of governance. So that was what I was trying to, of course, put out there. But my next question is this. Now, I remember having a conversation with some youths on this program on that Wednesday. And I remember one of them saying that one of their demands is that the president holds a sort of, I call it social media, I use the word town hall meeting with them, and not just, having a committee or them having a physical space to meet and all of that. They wanted him to meet with them on social media. And fast forward, just today alone, I was able to follow some of his live State of Nation address, even on social media, particularly on Instagram. What does this reflect of Kenya's, if at all, democracy?
Okay. As I said, very, very fortuitously for Kenyans, and very, very uncomfortable for that president, William Ruto. He is now the one on the back seat. He's now the one on kind of the run. So he's the one having to respond to an agenda that's being set by Kenyan youth. So he's on X, not because he wanted, not because he had deliberately planned to, but because he realizes that if he doesn't throw something that's enough to calm down the young people of Kenya, his government is out. So I'm quite glad that he has felt the pressure to have to go on X. I personally was in meetings the whole day, so I was not able to follow. But I do know that even when he declared his own X meeting, part of what they told him is, no, we're not coming to your meeting where you're setting the terms. You will come to our meeting where we set the terms. Now, obviously, there are some young people that he may be able to bribe or otherwise convince who are already on his side to make it look like they represent the Gen Zs of the country in their totality. But I think the young people have told him, no, you will meet us on our terms and not on your terms. And those people that you will have state managed do not speak for us. They at best speak for themselves. So that's the situation in Kenya right now.
All right, but do you also think, or are you of the opinion that these young people are in a way pushing their limits a bit too far in their demands? I mean, we are seeing a president who is actually bending to a lot of their demands, but quite a number of them are still not satisfied. Are they taking it too far?
I don't think they're taking it too far at all. I think each generation, when it's prosecuting its mission for its generation, Amilcar Cabral, older, more conservative generations see it as too far. But years later, we'll look back and know it wasn't too far. When my own generation 20 years ago took to the streets in our own way, those that came before us thought we were taking it too far. They themselves, when 20 years earlier, they were on prosecuting their own generation's big questions, their elders saw it as taking it too far. So I think they're doing just fine for their generation, for their time, for the world in which they live, and we will all be better for it. The other thing to say is they know their president very well. They know their president is a liar, a pathological liar, and that he will do face-saving things that may make you cheat you, that this is going to be fundamental, transformational, that we've, crossed, that will never go back. But they're being very, very keen to watch all the cues to ensure that this is not whitewashing. I mean, anybody who had President Ruto on the 2-hour Sunday evening interview with 3 of our leading journalists, so a man that's not remorseless, so a man that does not think you've done anything wrong, so a man that was still blaming Kenyans and telling them, you will suffer because you turned down my budget. My bill was going to be good for you. You will now suffer. So let them light the fire under his feet until they are very, very sure that the gains that they have made are cemented and irreversible.
But do you see a precedent that would come out of it without having to eventually resign?
There are various options. It's not an either or. A country, in each of our countries, whether it's explicitly written out in the Constitution, as the Constitution of Kenya in Section 1.3 does, or it's not explicitly written out, I know it's not explicitly written out in yours, the citizens have the constituent power. They delegate this power to arms of national, federal, devolved government that they choose. And they have the right to recall this power and reconstitute the state if it is not being run according to how they want. Now, should the citizens of Kenya insist that Ruto must go, they can have a dialogue and come up with a transitional government for themselves that will take them to an election. Alternatively, Ruto can make a counter offer and say, look here, let me have a government of national unity with all other parliamentary political parties until the end of my tenure or until some point that you choose, or some other formula can be found. So there's no shortage of formulas, and people should not be held hostage to make it look like there are no ways out.
All right. And now, what also do you think this message, or what kind of message do you think what is happening in Kenya right now sends to other African nations? Because right now that of Kenya, we are seeing young people take over the affairs of the state, young people that are usually considered, particularly the Gen Z generation, are considered to be persons of very low when it comes to attention span, who are more into entertainment than political affairs. But right now we are seeing that narrative change with Kenya. What does this portend, or what message does this send to other African countries?
I think the first thing that it is doing is correcting a historical injustice that we have done to generations of young people from the 70s. If you go to literally all of our countries that got independence in the late 50s and in the 60s, the cabinet was full of that time's Gen Zs. Many of our ministers, assistant ministers, permanent secretaries, directors of departments or state-owned enterprises were young Africans that were in their 20s and in their 30s. And that was the golden age of Africa. So in the age in which we were led by the people who in that generation, in their 20s and their 30s, was one of the ages of greatest growth. So it's been a myth, this lie that we brought up that says that people in their 20s are lazy or are distracted or can't multitask. Chinua Achebe wrote his big books when he was a senior civil servant. They could multitask. So this is what we're coming back to. What we have seen on, especially on social media in Kenya over the last 2 months, it's not just this last 2 weeks, is a very aware Gen Z generation who mix their music and their art with a very acute understanding of the Constitution, of the Public Finance Management Act, of the finance bill, of the economy of the country, down to the figures. We've seen a lot of civic education on TikTok of people showing specific provisions of the law and coming up with alternatives, of coming up with very, very detailed critique. So I think it is just that we're going back to the truth, that our youth can mix art, culture, heritage, political science, economics, business, and entrepreneurship, as well as innovation and invention.
All right, Donald, before, of course, I let you go, let's also talk about what trajectory or what precedence this is leaving on the political landscape in Kenya itself. What does this portend for any future politician? Because, I mean, I was on social media to actually follow some of the reactions, even from politicians. I saw a particular picture of a politician and his wife, you know, wearing an outfit, a T-shirt that had, "I am sorry, please forgive me" on it. You know, what does this portend for the political landscape moving forward in Kenya?
Two things. I'll talk about Africa first, then come back to Kenya. A dozen years ago, we had the North African Spring, and we gained some ground and lost some ground. A dozen years later now, I think the Kenyan youth have kicked off a sub-Saharan African Spring. I think that's really what we're going to see. Politics is going to change on our continent. And I think in Kenya, it has changed profoundly. If you've watched the Senate yesterday, several members of parliament were apologizing. Several members of parliament rejected pay rises, which had been granted to them last year by the Independent Salaries and Remuneration Commission and was supposed to kick off at the beginning of this present financial year, which started on Monday. They've repudiated them. A lot of them have actually regretted on some of the things they were doing, and they said they won't do it again, using fundraisings to churches and mosques and so on to bribe the citizenry, bribe the clergy and so on. They've said they'll not do that again. They realize that now conspicuous consumption will not be allowed, and that the citizens, especially the young citizens, will be crowdsourcing and going line item by line item in a 500-page budget document. So I think a few things have changed in Kenya forever. There's been some violence, and I deplore violence and crime. And I urge the young people, because the majority of them prosecuted a peaceful, non-violent, facts-based, issues-based campaign, that they continue until there's a moral reset, that Kenyan politicians, Kenyan faith-based leaders, Kenyan corporate leaders will all behave better going forward, because they know the youth are watching them and the youth will punish them.
All right. Thank you so much for being on the program. Donald Deya is the Chief Executive Officer of the Pan-African Lawyers Union from Tanzania. Once again, thank you for your time on the program. And that's a wrap on today's episode. In case you missed out, you can actually follow up on our YouTube platform. That's at News Central TV. You can follow me personally across socials at Dakbo at Digboyi. Thank you for watching. The opinions of our guests remains theirs and not that of News Central. Bye for now.